So one of the questions I get all the time about path lighting is really two questions. What kind of path light should I use and how far should I space them? And really that depends on what kind of path light you're gonna use. These are your more standard ones that most people have seen. The one important thing you wanna remember about path lighting is you don't wanna buy something that you can actually see the light source. A lot of the big glass dome ones where you can actually see the bulb are not your best option, because when what ends up happening is instead of lighting the features around it, all it does, it creates a big glare that all you do is you see a big light bulb.
Hey, Clayton, first off, thanks for sending the pictures. I mean, you've got a great property to work with. I kind of went over your notes there. So I think I got a pretty good idea of what you're saying. I will explain a couple things that I think you'll probably want to do. But yeah, so if I get started, I mean, the first thing, one of the things that you had mentioned, I think, is let's say I start over on the left here. I think where a big focus is going to be on the house. I love the blue house with the white trim is one of my favorite looks, and I'll kind of show you an example too. But I think that's kind of where you want to focus. You can do a little bit in the landscape, but I wouldn't do too much, because you almost want the silhouette of the landscape, I think, to stand out more than the actual features, with the exception of a couple bigger trees, especially with evergreens and junipers and all that kind of stuff. They're just they're very tough to do a really good job of lighting. So I think where I would probably focus more is on backlighting and backlighting the house. So for example, like in an area like this back window here, and I think you had mentioned this, is just kind of getting two lights fairly close to the house that kind of highlight this whole section. What I like is with the white trim and the white windows, you get a lot more reflective light, so you get more bang for your buck, and it's more noticeable. And what's cool about that is now you kind of get the silhouette of these smaller shrubs, which are not going to be too impressive to light anyway. And I find the house is going to be something you're going to want to light a little bit better. What you could do is you could throw one kind of in this back corner as well on the side of the porch, and maybe match it up on that side if there's room. Reason being, again, because you want to kind of create some backlight and take advantage of the nice trim and everything you have. And then, also you had mentioned the kind of the porch pillars here, and I love that idea of getting some accent lights at the base of all three of these guys here for sure. I don't think you need to put a whole bunch more downlighting and stuff in here. You definitely can, but I'll show you an example of the pictures. If you look, like here's an example of how they've done some downlighting, but you see how much reflective light that they get from this that kind of helps light those already, that you can kind of avoid having to put a whole bunch of extra lights, because I just don't think you would get the effect that maybe you're hoping for by doing that. So I would definitely have my 6 accent lights at the base there. And again, it also helps create that silhouette as well as some reflective light down on the bed, so you don't have to put a whole lot else in there. I think if you wanted to light this little peak, you could. I don't think you have to, because it's small enough. If it is an area that you wanted to light, then I would probably just use a wash light, just a lot softer, subtler light. And in the other areas, like I was just talking about, just using a standard accent light. But a wash light like this is not as bright, so less chance of creating a hot spot. I will give you a tip for, I think you mentioned mounting some lights here, and I love the idea of trying to mount the lights kind of on both sides of the windows in both of these areas. Again, I don't think you necessarily have to put one in the middle here. I think if you do a good job of lighting these peaks, that'll be enough. The one thing to be careful of, I know a lot of times what people will do on an area like this, and it works, you might just have to play with it, is they'll gutter mount the lights back here and then have them shining up. The only thing is, sometimes what happens is a lot of that light hits the rooftop, and you don't necessarily always want to see that. So 2 things you can do is, one, sometimes people will either put it on a riser so it's a little bit higher up so it misses this, or they'll actually flip the shroud around. So instead of having the kind of open section of the light facing down, they'll actually have the top part of the light facing down. It still does a pretty good job of keeping the water out and everything, so it's not typically something you have to worry about. Or the other option is people will just mount them closer to the house. And I'm not sure if it's in this picture or not. No, I had another picture where it shows it kind of mounted right here and here and here and here on a very similar house, and it does a great job. So that's probably where I would leave this section. If you wanted to highlight the beds a little bit more with some path and garden lighting, you definitely could. Couple different options to choose from. These are two of my favorites. The modern path lights are a very popular look. They're a little bit more expensive, but you can typically space these a little bit further apart too, closer to 12 to 14 feet, whereas these are maybe 8 to 10 feet apart. The reason I like this one is it casts light 360 degrees, where this is like 270. So where that's important is like in a bed like this, those 360 ones are nice because then it not only shines light forward, but it kind of shines it back on a couple of these areas. So if you wanted to make this front section pop a little bit, what you could do is if you have your 3 accent lights here, you might throw 2 of those 360 path lights kind of in here and in here in between those pillars, and all it does is it helps highlight that bed a little bit. And then you could also put a couple on both sides of the pathway here. One thing I do like doing though is not necessarily putting them right by the path, but kind of almost in the middle or even sometimes behind these a little bit, because if I can show you another example, and I'll just try and get to it real quick here, of path lighting that's kind of placed a little bit behind some structures, you get a little bit of this kind of shadowing effect too, so it's kind of a neat little effect. So anyway, something to think of for the front there, but I think that tackles most of that. In this area over here, I think you had mentioned same thing, getting a couple accent lights kind of to highlight this back section of the house here. So I would probably throw 2 of those there. And then I would throw another one on the front of this tree, just because this is more of a feature tree and you'll get 2 effects. You'll have the tree lit up, but you'll also get the silhouette of the top section against the backlit portion of the house. I like the idea of highlighting these trees, and it really just depends on where you want your viewing angle to be. If you want them to look really good from looking out from the house, and obviously you're going to want the lights on that side. If this is a roadside and you want it to look good from there, then you're going to light them from the other side. That being said, you can always light them from both. It's just, obviously the cost goes up. Something else to consider too is if these lights are going to be in the grass area, which because these are wider canopies, you may have to get the light out here a bit more, or out here to catch that effect. Then you might want to go to an in-ground light, for the reasons that you can put this flush in the grass and you can just mow over it, and you're not have fixtures sticking out of the grass that you got to worry about weed trimming around and stuff. Yeah, I like the idea also of accenting this tree. I think you had mentioned just to kind of balance things out. We've got the front section of the house. I think, like you said, with all those uplights, the 2 up here, I don't think you need a whole lot of hanging lights. I think you're going to get a really good effect. Also, by having a light here, maybe a slightly intenser one kind of in this back corner, you're going to throw a little bit of extra light up here. So when you're choosing a light like this usually comes standard with what they'll call a 20 watt equivalent lamp, which is a 4 watt LED. But for an area like that back corner, you might want to use something that's closer to a 35 watt equivalent. And we can put all this together for you based on your suggestions. Just let us know what you like and stuff, and then we can put that in a kit for you so you have all that properly. But just something to keep in mind there. And then I'll keep going. I think I just got a couple more pictures. Yeah, this front area, like I talked about, I mean, I like having the lights kind of back here so it can kind of cast a little bit of shadow through those. I do like the idea, because you have a walkway in front, of having the path lights kind of more on the house side, I would put it, so that you're taking advantage of throwing a little bit of light back on these beds, but then also the walkway, so your path lights kind of here and here. And then highlighting this guy. Yeah, so you might not have a need to put a corner light on this porch. I think if you just light this last pillar, that'll be enough. Again, you don't have to do overkill. You can definitely put a light in here, a gutter mounted accent light to light up this little peak. I think if you have both of those lights here, that's going to do a really good job of lighting this area. It's really up to you and budget. I think it would definitely look good if you were to do it and kind of have it in here so it kind of catches this whole little section. But I think if you missed it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And then, yeah, and on this side here, I mean, there's all kinds of things. In a perfect world, what you would do is you would actually have some in-ground lights mounted into the pavement driveway that just shoot up all 4 of these areas. That would be the ideal situation. The other thing you could do is you could gutter mount some lights to catch these peaks. The only thing you want to keep in mind is that you want to just keep the lighting consistent. So maybe you gutter mount one here, and you gutter mount one here that shines out this way, and then you have like 2 gutter mounted up here that kind of catch this top peak. Could be a really neat way to go about it. And then yeah, this little second garage area, I mean, keep the same concept with the with the lighting the pillars if you can. I like the idea of kind of trying to throw a light under both of these back windows, and then I would probably try and throw an accent light in here that catches this tree as well as this window, because what that's going to do is it's going to make this appear bigger as it casts some shadows along here, but then it'll allow that light to get to that top section and top peak. So maybe throw 3 lights on there, and if you wanted to throw a couple path lights, again, depending on the model, you go with either 8 to 14 foot spacings, but something like that would look good, and I think would just kind of nicely round that out. So there's a lot of ideas. It's a longer video, but hopefully it gives you some good ideas. Let me know what you think of all those, and then if you want me to build a kit, just send me kind of quantities of lights that you're thinking based on those suggestions. We can do that with proper transformer and everything. You may want to run a separate smaller transformer to the second garage or this guest house, depending on where everything's located. If it has power here, it might be cheaper to just do that with a small transformer, run a few lights along here, than having to run a bunch of extra wire out here. So again, let me know if you have any other questions, and hopefully you find this helpful. Thanks, Clayton.
So one of the questions I get all the time about path lighting is really 2 questions. What kind of path light should I use, and how far should I space them? And really that depends on what kind of path light you're going to use. These are your more standard ones that most people have seen. The one important thing you want to remember about path lighting is you don't want to buy something that you can actually see the light source. A lot of the big glass dome ones where you can actually see the bulb are not your best option, because when what ends up happening is instead of lighting the features around it, all it does is it creates a big glare that all you do is you see a big light bulb, whereas that's not really the case. Whereas if you have something where you notice here you can't see the light source at all this is going to do now is light everything down below. So this is a pretty standard path light. This is about 15 inches high. You can get them a little bit higher too, where they come about 20 inches high. And what that's going to do is that's going to spread the light a little bit further. A lot of times people will think, hey, if I put a brighter bulb in there, I'll get more light. That's not necessarily the case, because really all that does, if you put a brighter bulb, it's going to create a bigger hot spot on the ground. It's not necessarily going to spread it any farther. You're more able to do that if you just get that light a little bit higher. So that's one way to get more out of this light. Typically a path and garden light like this, you're gonna space somewhere between 8 and 12 feet apart. The darker the area, the more you can space it. But again, it doesn't have to light every square inch of your pathway. It's more important when you're doing something like this. If you have an area, garden bed like this, and I wanna have 4 path lights in here, that I just space them out evenly, as opposed to trying to make sure I have enough to cover every 8 feet. So that's a good tip with that. And then the other path light that's really popular is the modern path lights. We can't keep these in stock. These get sold out all the time because it's a much more robust, we'll call it a much sexier light. I've been commented plenty of times on that this is just a really sexy looking light. Yes, you're gonna pay probably about twice as much for these, but they're a lot more material. They're built super strong. They fit that modern design, and they're a little bit taller than the typical path light. As you can see here, if I kind of place them at the same height, this one's a little bit higher. So again, what does that do? It's gonna spread that light a little bit further down the pathway or whatever area you're looking at. So when I'm looking at these lights, I'm usually spacing these closer to 12, 14, 16 feet apart. So yes, they're more expensive, but you typically need a lot fewer of them, and it fits in with a lot of your guys' homes' more modern design. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys got some great do-it-yourself landscape lighting tips. Now, please be sure to go to our website at lightingdoctor.ca and check out our how-to page. It's full of great resources, from our podcast to our video to our most frequently asked questions. And also check out our Try It Before You Buy It light, where you can actually go now and get one of our premium quality uplights and a King Innovation Insta Light, which is basically a battery pack now that allows you to go and run those lights and test them out on your property. Try it for 14 days. If you don't love it, send it back to us and we'll give you a full refund. And if not, you keep the light at a discounted rate and go and buy what you need for your project. So thanks again for watching. Please be sure to leave us a comment. We'd love your feedback. Have a great day.